Hey guys, this is just one guy, and this is my tutorial series, Unity for Noobs. Now, in this episode, we're going to make a AI, and I've done this before. So in the last time I recorded it, it took kind of long, so I'm gonna go through it kind of fast. Now, first, we're gonna go through a demonstration. Now, right now we have this AI, and I've made him red. You can see I changed around a bit of things. I'm playing around with the Unity 5 system and the shaders, and they're really nice. But I've made this AI red, and what he's coded to do is chase us. But he has a weapon range which he can shoot, and a detection range. And when we enter the detection range, he's gonna basically attack us. And if he's in the weapon range, he's gonna shoot us too. And I'll go over that in a second. But first, let's see what happens when we go and try to go near him. Now you can see he's not in weapon range yet. He's in weapon range, so he's shooting. Now you can see the difference between the detection range and the weapon range. I've set the weapon range purposely shorter than the detection range just to show you that. And he's using the Unity nav mesh system to move around. And he basically just chases us. And if we get into his shooting range, he'll shoot. And he'll kill us. It's pretty accurate. Now let's go over how we did that, because it's actually a slight bit complicated. Now we only have two scripts. We have the AI class and the AI controller. Let's go to the scripts. Well, let's go to the setup first. Okay. Now I've set these up as classes. It's important to note I've learned a little bit from how Unity set up their first-person controller and tried to imitate it just from some of the things I learned from Unity. Now, the reason I set this up in classes and then called this class in one script, I noticed if you have all three of these scripts updating, it drops the frame rate, especially when you have like 100 characters on screen, and it really drops the frame rate when all of them are updating three scripts at the same time. And I've noticed it was much simpler to make three different classes and then update it in one script. It also gives you a lot more control, and I recommend setting your controllers up this way for your characters, because it's just nicer. It gives you a lot more control. Like, say I wanted the brain to update before the attacks, it'll let me control that. And if they were two separate scripts, I couldn't control that. Well, they would be updating at different times, and well, not different times. I'm sure there's some logic to it, but it's just more control this way, and that's why it's like that. The AI class has all these classes right here, and then it just updates like that. And I really recommend setting your controller up that way. It's a lot easier, and it's way better on the frame rate. And that's just a little trick I learned. That's why I set up this way. Anyway, the brain controls the move speed, which basically controls how fast it moves. Now I'm not going to go over the nav mesh stuff, because I went over it in my other tutorial, tips and tricks. If you need to know about that, just go back and look at that video, and you can see how everything's set up with the nav mesh. Now the nav mesh, we have the move speed, and then we have the minimum distance. This controls how fast the character can move, well, the maximum speed of the character and the acceleration of the character, the way I set it up. And then this controls the minimum distance, how close he gets to the character before he stops. And then we have the legs, which is the nav mesh agent, and then we have the enemy detection. Now imagine there's a bubble, and that's how it is around the character. And once a player comes into this bubble, that's when that's how far away it tells you to detect it. Now I've got it set for 20, which should be about here. And once you enter this range to this close to the character, he'll detect you and start going to try to shoot you. And if he's in shoot range, he'll just shoot directly. If he's not, he'll run towards you and shoot. And then we have the rotation speed. Now it's important to note that the rotation speed must be set high, at least at 120. If you set it under 120, it's not really going to rotate that fast. Well, it'll rotate slowly, but it won't really rotate the way a normal human would. And I recommend at least 120 to 250, as you can see. And then we have the target. Now this is hold on a second. Now this is the actual target we want to attack, and that's different from the targets, which I'll go over in a second. And then we have to provoke. This tells the NPC when to attack. And then we have the attack range. For all purposes, you can just think of this as the gun range. How far he can shoot the gun for just basic purpose. That's how you what you can think of this as. And then we have targets. Now targets, and here you might say, why we have targets and target. That's because sometimes he'll need to attack multiple enemies. Now this is coded to attack an enemy called player. I mean, that's tag player. You can change it if you want, and it's coded out in the scripts just in case you download the scripts, but I've set it up to attack players. Now sometimes he might need to attack multiple players, so what we have is he gathers an array of players and then chooses a target from that array, and that's why we have two different ones right here. And if you have a giant array full of players, what he'll do is he'll go through them one by one. He'll kill one and then go to the next one, kill one, then go to the next one. And then we have the attack timer and the cooldown. Now for all intents and purposes, I will leave that to 2, and what we have is the cooldown controls how fast he can shoot the gun. Now if you were to remove this, he would just shoot infinite bullets back to back, and basically if you got hit with one, you would be dead. So what this does is slow him down, so he'll shoot him based on his timer. And if it was like a shotgun, you would want it really slow, and if it was an Uzi, you would run it really fast. But you could play around with this setting just to get what you like, but I recommend leaving it at 0.5. And then we have the can attack. Just set this to false. This is telling the NPC when it can attack, and works for this whole system. When a timer hits 0, it says can attack, and then the NPC shoots the bullet, and then it resets it based on the cooldown, and that's how that works. Then we have the stats, and the only thing in the stats is how much damage we want this NPC to do. And I've set it to -10, but you can set it to whatever it is for your personal gain. Then we have the firing point. Now the firing point is just where we instantiate the bullet from, and then we have the bullet, which I went over in my other tutorial series, which you can go back and look at, when we created the bullet with the bullet controller. Now I haven't really changed none of this, but it is important to note that you need the firing point. I've set my NPC up to just have a gun, and it just has the basic what's the name, it just has the basic visuals for the gun, and then it has this firing point. This firing point is the only real important part of the gun. Now it's important to note that you should always put your firing pin a good distance away from the gun, because sometimes if your gun has a collider, it can hit the gun, and sometimes the bullets won't come out. But your gun shouldn't really have a collider anyway, but just in case, you never know how your game is set up. And then I set my NPC up with my health bar tutorial, which I went over in my previous tutorial. If you want to see how that's done, you go over there. If you could just go over there and download the script, and then what's the name, put it on here. And I put a rigid body. The rigid body is not important, but it is important to note that either the rigid body or the bullet either the enemy or the bullet needs a rigid body in order for them to detect collisions. And I've just set it up with a capsule collider, the health bar, the rigid body, the nav mesh agent, which I went over in my nav mesh tutorial, and then the AI controller, and then the network viewers for the online stuff. And that's basically it. Let's go over how the script works. Now first we're going to go to this AI class, and we have the class AI Brain. Now we went over a lot of this before, so I'm going to go through this quickly. We got the move speed, which controls how fast the agent can go and how fast it accelerates. The minimum distance it can get to the player. The nav mesh agent, which I've named Legs because basically it controls how he moves. The enemy detection range, which basically controls how close the enemy can get before he detects them, and then the rotation speed, which controls how fast he turns. Now this is important, I'll go over it later, because it not only controls how fast he goes around corners, but how fast he turns to aim at the player, which is very important because I use a unique system for certain reasons, which I'll go over when I get into the AI controller. Now all this is commented out, so if I'm going too fast or you get confused, when you download the script, you can just read it directly in the script. Now we have the AI attack, which controls all the variables for attacking, which is the target, which I went over before. It's the actual target we want to attack. The provoke, which controls when the enemy attack, to let the enemy know to attack. The attack range, which is basically the range of the gun. The targets, if you have multiple targets, we want targets in here, then to choose a target, which we right here. And then we have the cooldown, which is the cooldown, the attack timer and the cooldown, and it can attack, which basically just controls when the enemy attacks. The only important numbers in this is the cooldown. The rest of it you can leave the same. I would set this to private, but then I wouldn't be able to access the variable. Then we just have the countdown timer, and as we can see, it's just as I said before, this controls, this slows down the enemy attack so they're just not shooting bullets back to back. And basically what it does is count down time to the attack timer, and this is just to stop errors. And then if the attack timer equals 0, it basically just said can attack equals true, then it resets to the cooldown. Then we have the AI stats, which basically just controls the damage, how much damage to do. Now it's important to note that the damage must always be a negative number. If it were a positive number, it would heal the person we're trying to attack. Then we have the AI controller, which basically gets all three of the classes, the brain, the attack, and the stats, and put it into one class, which I explained why in the beginning of the video. And then we have this variable find enemies. This boolean is here because basically I use GameObject.find with tag, and as we all know, that's very slow, so we don't want to call that every frame, but it is okay if we call it one frame. So basically what it does is it checks this variable, it's false at the beginning, and then when it calls the function, finds all the enemies, it sets it to true. That way we're not calling the function ever again. Then we have the firing point, which is the transform, which we want to instantiate the bullet from. Then we have the actual bullet that we want to fire itself. Then we have the target point. Now when the NPC aims, it needs a vector 3, a target point to tell a bullet to travel to, and that's basically this right here. I set it to private because there's no real reason you should ever need to change, modify that. Then in the start method, we just get the NavMesh agent components and set the attack timer to the cooldown. Then in the attack, if we do have a target, okay, this is what I was going over before. Most of the times in video games, people use transform.lookat, and that's how they turn the enemy to the target. But that's not what I want. There are a couple of reasons that I don't use transform lookat. One, it will modify the if I were to tell him transform lookat, he would not only move around on this axis, he would also move around on this axis. So if he went higher, he would turn around like he would turn around like this to look at you, which is what we don't want. The second reason is it's super accurate. No matter what, he would always point towards the player. Even if he were to teleport, he would just turn around like this instantly and look at you, which would create a very unfair game because his bullets will always be aimed directly at you. So what I've done is I've put this code right here, which basically gets the distance in the direction of the enemy, and then we look at the enemy and we change we turn the NPC using the slurp function and going around by the rotation speed. Now that was the reason I was saying rotation speed is important. This will kind of control how hard the enemy is, because if you set it low, then he'll always be turning trying to shoot the player, and he'll be missing a lot. But if you set it real high, he'll be accurate, and you could basically use this to set the difficulty of the NPC. Then we have the if the enemy is in attack range, we hit the provoke. Now it's important to note this is not the detection range but the attack range. And if the enemy is in attack range, and if we are provoked to attack, then it starts the countdown timer and then fires the bullet. And then if the enemy is dead, basically if we don't have a target, we look for more more targets. Now this happens in the beginning of the game, and then it happens if we kill an enemy. And that's basically the function, just to call the targets once they're in range. And then we have this if we are provoked and we have a target, and the target is far away and we need to chase him, that's what it calls this right here, and it just gets attack that target. Now I've set this up to take a transform, but the actual function takes a vector 3, which I went over in my NavMesh tutorial. Now here's the actual chase function. Since I only want to chase people and not go to a specific direction, I give them a transform instead of a vector 3, and then we get the distance from the actual NPC, which is transform position, to the actual enemy we want to hit. And then if the distance is greater than the minimum distance that we get towards the player, we want to move towards the player. So then we set the stopping distance as the minimum distance, we set the acceleration as the move speed, and then that's going to change later on, the acceleration thing, when we start animating the characters. Then we set the speed to the move speed, and then we set the legs to our destination, which is the function to tell the NPC where to go. That takes a vector 3. We set that as the person dot position, which is the transform we take it in. Now I've just set this up like this because I found it much easier to deal with transform than vector 3s. Now we have the last function, and basically what this does is if the player is in range, it tells the NPC to attack them. And as you can see, this is what I was talking about before. It uses the game objects.find with tag, and it makes it the attack targets, but it only calls it once. It says if it's false, then we're gonna call it, and then we're gonna set the find enemies to true. That way it never calls it again, even if it calls this function again. And then once we have the array of players, we go through them and we find out, do we have a target? And if we don't already have a target, it chooses a target, basically the first one on the list, and then it gets the distance to see if the target's in distance. If the target is within the detection range where we can see them, it says and if we actually do have a person, just to make sure, it sets the provoke to true, and then it gives the enemy a target, and then it returns, so it's not calling this over and over again. The return is here basically to make sure it doesn't change targets over and over again and have your enemy going crazy. Then we have the fire bullet function, and basically all this does is it says if the NPC can attack, and that's basically if the attack timer equals 0, and we do have a target. It sets the target as the player's position, and then it creates the bullet basically, and then it gives the bullet the information it needs, like the target point of where we want it to go, basically the vector 3 which the bullet will head towards. It resets the attack timer to the cooldown, and then it sets can attack to false, which is basically the same thing, and then it gives the bullet the information that it's the person who shot it, and then it does random damage between the actual damage reset and +5 more. Now again, I say we always need negative numbers, so this is -5, and that's what that does. So if we were to set it, the damage at -10, it would do something between -10 and -15 of damage, and that's just to make the damage a little more realistic. And I believe that is it. As always, the scripts are the script links are in the description down below. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to suggest a tutorial, please suggest a tutorial in the comments down below. Thank you for watching.